guys, we
Greetings, fellow Storm Riders. Welcome to session number 53 of Brain Software with Mike Mandel, and I'm Chris Thompson. He's staying welterweight, has been wheat-free for 43 days, and has just returned from a keynote speech in Boston, Massachusetts. He is the Buccaneer of Trance, the fearless pirate of hypnotic power, and the world's #1 Storm Rider, Mike Mandel.
Yes, Chris, back once again. Just a man of such vigor and vitality of someone half his age. Yes, it's great to be back. And we want to up front, before we touch on any of these points, apologize that
profusely.
we have been... Well, let's not go crazy. This is free. I mean,
Well, yes, but I still feel really bad. Like, we've made people wait a long time.
I know, but you're an Enneagram 9, so you don't want to break rapport, and I'm an 8, and really don't take it quite as badly as you do. But seriously, guys, we have taken a long time. We've had a crazy busy summer. A friend of mine has just passed away. It's been a tough year in a lot of ways. But we are back to the chagrin and terror of the other hypnosis instructors who we just sort of stepped away for a bit, and now we're back in our man of war, steaming through their lives and blasting broadsides in all directions.
Yes, and not only that, Mike, but I think since we've essentially wrapped up the very heart, the core of the Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy, which has been keeping us so busy over the last almost 2 years, that we're now going to have a little bit more free time to get back to a regular podcast schedule.
Now, having said that, we're glad to be back. I am staying welterweight, weighed in at 170 today, which is fantastic instead of the 190 I'd ballooned up to. So tougher than nails, feeling awesome. I have been wheat-free for 43 days, and if you have not tried that out for yourself, give it a shot, try it on for size, cut all the grain out of your life for 1 month and notice how amazing you feel. And then go out and eat some donuts and bread and stuff and notice how crap you feel. The actual term, Chris, that not many people know, is crapulent.
Crapulent,
which is a real term. Yeah, crapulent means overstuffed with food or feeling logy from eating too many sweet and sticky foods and things like that. It's a great term.
No kidding. I thought it was a colloquial expression.
Not as such.
Okay.
Now, I am back from Boston. There were many interesting things there.
What brought you there?
I was in Boston doing a keynote speech for a company called Satuit. They flew me down for a 1-hour thing. I stayed 2 nights, went out on a wonderful cruise of the harbor with them. But the weird thing is, Chris, as you know, I'm a blues fanatic.
Yes.
And I got back to my hotel, and I see in the hallway one of my all-time blues heroes, in this case blues heroines, Rory Block. Rory Block was a young woman who, in her youth, traveled extensively through the U.S., learning from the giants of blues, and she is absolutely amazing. And I wanted to talk to her because her music is so important to me, and I was able to parlay an introduction. I said, Mike Mandel from Toronto. I said, we have a friend in common. And she said, oh, who? And I said, Prakash John. And Prakash is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He played for Alice Cooper, Lou Reed, everybody, and is probably the best electric bass player in the world. So right away, she lit up, was very nice to me, had our pictures done together. And the other thing that made Boston so great, despite being just a phenomenal city, was I got to do some random hypnosis on the plane, cure my sound man of his arachnophobia right after my event, sitting at the soundboard, and hang out with one of our awesome online students, Matthias. And Matthias is an OBGYN, an obstetrician gynecologist, for those of you who don't know what that means, from Boston, or actually from Germany, lives in Boston. And he met up with me, picked me up at the hotel. We went out, had some wine, and he drove me all around before we had the wine through Harvard Square, and we saw MIT and Harvard, an absolutely fantastic visit to Boston. So if I'm coming to a city near you, doing a keynote or something, I'll make sure we post it on the podcast early enough, and I'd love to hook up with some of my students and hang out together.
Yeah, what I like about Matthias is his interest in wellness as well, because he is very much into the same stuff that we've been talking about.
He's of the same ilk.
Making sure that you do not consume abundance of complex carbohydrates, sugars, grains, all that stuff. It makes such a difference.
And he also does body weight exercises,
yes,
as we do, which are vastly superior to weight training. We've had guys who did weight training who were in our jiu-jitsu course. I mean, I'm saying doing it exclusively, where they're not balancing the agonist and the antagonist muscles. We had, remember that hockey guy, a hockey ref who came in a number of years ago? His first night out, big muscular guy, bodybuilder, and I threw him with a wrist throw, and he was actually injured before he hit the ground. He pulled muscles and things in the air. You see it all the time.
Yep, happens. So
Now, let me just tell you, we're going to talk about intersection in this as well, Chris, which is an intriguing concept.
Let's jump right into that one.
Okay.
Because we talked about it a bit before we hit record, and I'm anxious to know what's coming up here.
Anxious probably
isn't the right word. I'm intrigued.
Right.
Oh my God, I'm so worried. What's going to happen?
Hypnotic intersection is a concept I've been playing with for about 8 months now. And I'm trying and failing thus far to find a way to teach it to other people, but I'm getting closer all the time.
But Mike isn't the real issue. How are you going to keep failing?
Thanks, Chris. What else have you just forgotten? Yeah, right. So, actually, intersection is my way of explaining how I do hypnosis, because as you know, Chris, we've talked to people who've come out to our training, and they come in from all over the world now. We've had students from Australia and France and Norway and everywhere, all over the U.S.
I know where this is going.
And they say, I studied with so-and-so, don't mention any names here, but he didn't even do any hypnosis in the course. He just talked about it and made us do it. And why do you think that is, Chris?
Because they're fearful that it will fail if they attempt to do a demonstration.
Right. What if it doesn't work?
I remember this exact comment from one of our students in the last class.
Someone in the U.S., one of the trainers.
He had trained in the southern U.S. and this guy apparently just didn't. He was well-known name, never did any demos.
Never did the demos. Now, based on that, and we don't badmouth people, we're just talking in general terms, but based on that, this whole intersection thing is the way I've chosen to describe it. Now, Chris, remember our last Architecture of Hypnosis course? We had our friend Nico there from Strasbourg, France.
Yes.
We had Jim from Norway and a number of other people. And I remember Jim was concerned that he might not be a good hypnotic subject. And sent me an email en route from an airport.
Yep.
And so what happened in the first 5 minutes? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah, I totally remember. You started doing a demonstration of, I believe it was kinesthetic ambiguity on Chris at the front of the room. At the front,
Chris from Ohio.
Right, and then you...
He was in trance.
I believe you at the same time, you segued over to a triple bind induction to someone towards the back of the room.
Which was Lisa.
And then you walked over to Jim and did a handshake interrupt.
Glued his hand to his head.
Yes.
And he was stuck like that. So I had 3 people in trance in the first 5 minutes of the class. And this never fails to make an impression.
You hadn't planned that.
No, I hadn't planned it. But it's not a bragging thing. I'm not saying this to, oh, look what I can do. I'm saying, oh, look what you can do if you study with me. Because that is the principle of intersection. And here's the best way for me to explain it, Chris. I watch some trainers, and the one guy who coughs into the microphone and everything and asks you if you enjoyed your potty break and all that, he treats you like your 5-year-old kid. When he's working with a camera or if he's on video, he's talking to the camera. He's not paying any attention to the subject. So there's very, very little rapport. Although he has the charisma and the experience that people generally respond and go into trance anyway. Now, the difference is, if you have that strong rapport, you can make amazing things happen. Intersection is my way of cutting into the other person's loop and intersecting it with my own. And it creates a ludicrous rapport super fast. Okay. So the picture I like to use is if you have a couple of soap bubbles, notice how the molecular attraction will pull them together. Yes. And sometimes they'll pop into one large bubble.
Yes. And that's a great metaphor.
Intersection is a way someone's sitting there, and as I'm beginning to talk to them, and I'll give the example from the plane 2 days ago, I'm starting to sense their feedback loop, their psychodynamic loop, which I see is projecting out in front of them. It's my way of seeing it. There's not an actual thing there. I'm not crazy.
Okay, let's actually pause right there for a second and point out that this is really a keen calibration skill.
It is indeed.
It is calibration. Calibration being one of the C's in the Mr. CC acronym, which is Meta Model, Rapport, Calibration, and Congruence of NLP. It maps over to hypnosis. You have to develop great calibration skills, and that's what you're talking about here.
Yes, and Derek Balmer, here's a segue, one of my mentors, Cambridge linguist and NLP trainer, Derek Balmer, taught us, and he would say, think of the 3 Stooges one at a time, Curly, Larry, or Moe, right? And he'd look at you and calibrate, so he would shake it off. Don't think of the next one, Larry. And then later in the day, he'd just come up, we'd be in the hallway, he'd be leaning against the fireplace, waiting for us to finish an exercise, and I'd come out and say, which Stooge am I thinking of? He'd say, Larry. I'd say, shut up. He would nail it every time. But I surpassed it because he taught me well. I could add Curly Joe and Shemp as well and do 5 of them.
Oh, wow.
So if you practice, this becomes an unconscious thing. So you are calibrating this biofeedback psychodynamic loop that is developing between you and the other person. By intersecting, I'm sort of coming in at an angle and bang, suddenly taking control and upping the rapport off the scale. And it's something that's easier to do than explain, and we're going to be teaching all my master hypnotist students that this November. I'm going to have it nailed as a protocol that they can do to intersect someone. So that enables you to, to do these remarkable things, seemingly impossible things really quickly, like get a waiter to permit you to pay for your food with a library card, right? Which we have on video, and it's going to be in the Academy.
Yes.
Now, having said that, I was on the plane to Boston, and this lovely elderly woman sat down next to me in the window seat. And her name was Mari. And she, not Marie, Mari. She corrected me. Irish. And going to Boston for the first time since her husband passed away 3 years ago. And she hadn't been to Boston in many years. And she and her husband, that was one of their favorite places. And a friend or relative had convinced her to come to Boston. And I was immediately calibrating with her eye accessing, the shift in her vocal tone, that she missed her husband dearly. Who wouldn't if you've been married for, 40 years? And was now feeling a sense of trepidation that by going to Boston, it was going to reaccess all of these kinesthetics and might put her back into a grief state.
Right.
And I intersected with her sitting there, locked eyes with her, and she turned completely sideways and began to go into trance. And I said, and how amazing will it be, Mari, when you go to Boston? And when you land, and during your time there, discover how remarkably healing this is for you. And her face flushed, and she was so freaked out when she got off the plane. She said, can I have your personal phone number and your email? So I gave them to her. I haven't heard from her yet. But she was just glowing when she got off the plane. It is intersecting someone with your communication so that your loop now engulfs theirs, and you begin to function almost as one organism. It's strange.
My experience with this, and I want to ask you if this is sort of similar to what you're describing, is that you're essentially calibrating when the person is at this, just like we talk about an anchoring peak state, peak rapport.
Bingo.
They're
in
a trance with you because of the conversation. It's interesting to them. They like you. They're in rapport. And then you don't need an induction. You go directly into Ericksonian language with some direct suggestion.
Yes. And the rapport itself becomes a trance.
Yeah, in this case, it wasn't really a direct suggestion at all. It was an empowering question,
right,
delivered as a suggestion.
And the empowering question has the suggestions built into it. And I'm analog marking and embedding them as I'm saying them to her. And this
really
wonderful, wonderful woman. So that was kind of cool. And but it's the whole concept of intersecting them. Now, having said this, Chris, you may not realize this until I point it out to you, whereupon you certainly will. You have this ability in spades with kids.
Oh, yeah.
You absolutely do. I've never seen anyone work with kids like you do, where a kid can your daughter can be in a weird mood or something, or fussy, and you can just get down to their level, intersect with that child, and totally change everything in the matter of a few sentences.
I think that you may not realize this, but you just gave me this perfect explanation to understand how what you meant.
Which was entirely the point.
Right. I mean, when you talked about this intersecting someone in terms of a hypnotic loop, yeah, I mean, a child-parent interaction is the same thing. It's just a specialized, it's just one specific example of a relationship.
Yes, and we're all in relationship with people as soon as we communicate with them. So my question to you, Chris, my empowering question for you, young man, is how awesome will you discover it to be when you are able to intersect not just with children, but with absolute strangers?
Absolutely. Don't I already do it?
That's right.
Yeah.
It's just when you realize you're doing it. It's when you do it consciously. That's the thing. Because you do it already.
Let's actually bring this to a quick discussion then about
all right.
The hierarchy. There's this hierarchy, and I can't remember the expression you used to describe it, but when you go from not knowing, so the unconscious incompetence, the not knowing you're doing something wrong or that you can't do something.
Don't even know that you might not even know the subject exists.
Yeah, so then you learn a skill,
unconscious incompetence,
and you eventually go from unconscious incompetence to conscious competence.
No. You go from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. Now you know.
I skipped that one.
You know the language Bulgarian exists right now. But you're still not able to speak.
Okay, yeah, I see what you're doing. We're just breaking it down for everyone who isn't familiar with it. So you started unconscious incompetence.
You don't know Bulgarian, and you don't even know you don't know Bulgarian.
You don't know what you don't know. That's the way to put it.
Right.
Then you are aware that you don't know. So you are aware that a country, Italy, exists, but you didn't know anything about it before. Now you know the name of the country, so you know that you're completely uneducated on the topic of Italy.
Exactly.
Then you go there and you learn a little bit about, well, let's not use geography anymore as the metaphor here, but then let's say you learn a language and you can conversationally get by, like probably my French
so
skills.
you're consciously competent.
Yeah, you have to now consciously think about what you're doing, like when you first learn to drive a standard car and the clutch and the gear shift and all that stuff. And you really have to think about it. And then eventually you get to unconscious competence, which is where you can have that conversation and pick up the loose change that fell out of your pocket and shift gears and change the radio station all at the same time without thinking about it, right?
Yes, yes.
So why I brought this up is you had explained that there was this almost this weird changing sense of what you notice as you go through that. So let's say that you were about to hesitate and pause and say, I do that sometimes. You'll hear me on the podcast because we don't edit this stuff out. And
we just say we'll edit it out.
You're doing the, and then eventually someone says, you know what, Chris, you can become a much more fluid speaker if instead you just take a pause. And that way, without saying, as your filler words, you'll seem much more authoritative, whatever it is. So remember when you told me about this, you said you're going to catch yourself doing it.
Yeah.
Then you're going to catch yourself before you do it. Then you're going to not do it and then realize that you didn't do it.
Right. And then you'll forget about it.
Yeah, which is really, so those are is that the 3 stages?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, it's as good as an encapsulation as anything.
First you'll do it and then go, oh, darn, I meant to say nothing and pause instead of saying Right. Then you'll catch yourself as you do it. You'll say and immediately say, oh, crap.
Yeah, you rewind it. Yeah.
Right. And then you'll not say it and realize,
hey,
I didn't.
You were going to say.
Exactly.
And then it'll just be missing from your speech patterns. Yeah, and you won't notice anything.
So the empowering question is, what stage are you at in a change that you're looking to make, that you are making in your life? And how fun will it be when you get to the next stage?
I'll say that again. That's a good one.
What stage are you at in the description that we just gave regarding a change that you are currently making in your life? And how awesome is it going to be when you realize that you are at the next step?
Already.
That's right.
That's great, Chris. Really, really good stuff.
All right. So that was kind of cool. We didn't plan that discussion.
No, we didn't. And now we just come in with the big chunks. I want to talk to you about this. I'm only saying this because I find this
book.
This utter cowpat of a book in front of me. Well, it isn't really an utter cowpat of a book. Very few books are utter cowpats. This does have some good stuff in it. Even the most dersative book, you'll find something that is useful.
If anyone can figure out what book we're talking about, we're happy to have you email us. We're not going to name the book or the author.
There'll be a prize if you can name it.
Yeah, that's actually a good idea.
We will. We'll give you a free download.
All right.
But the thing is, this is a book on hypnosis. It's a book about hypnotherapy. And Chris will verify that in my search for personal excellence, I am always studying the subjects that fascinate me. So I'm always learning more about graphology and graphoanalysis. I'm always learning more about hypnosis because it is a never-ending field. So I'm returning to Erickson's work and reading the greats of the past and always topping up what I know. So I'm getting further and further glenation with the entire subject.
And as you say, sharpening the knife.
Sharpening the blade. Now, I like to know what the other instructors are teaching because I find it comforting to realize how utterly cowpatish some of their things are. So we want to offer you the finest hypnosis training in the world, and we believe we do, both through our live classes at University of Toronto St. Michael's College and through our online academy. But so I occasionally buy books and things by other trainers. Someone said to me once, like you log in under a false name. I said, no, not at all. I mean, just as me. I don't care if they know want to see what they're doing. They do the same thing with us. Where, it's always like two security services probing each other's weaknesses and things. Of course, we don't have any. But anyway, this book, I thought, well, I want to see what these two noted hypnosis trainers are teaching in the United States. And I'd heard some good things and some rather odd things. And I'd seen one of them on video, and I just couldn't handle it because he was treating people like a 5-year-old, like the cat's 5-year-old, saying, does anyone need a potty break? And did you enjoy your potty break? And treat them like adults. Okay, so that's okay. I'm not going to go there, but big on the hypnotist and hypnotize, which grates on my nerves. Right. But I wanted to see the course, at least the textbook they were using. So I went online to order a copy from them.
And you told me, we'll get to this. Once you told me about it, I actually found it in electronic form, and I bought it before you even had yours in your hand because I wanted to beat you to the punch.
I want a hard copy book. I like an actual physical copy. I've reached that age where all things must be held.
So you went to the guy's website to buy it?
No, his website.
And what did you discover, Mike?
The book was like, well, Chris, I discovered something very disturbing.
Yes.
The book was, I think, like,
$31 or something.
Yeah, $31 or something like that. That's reasonable.
Somewhere in that range.
So I clicked to buy it, my Visa and everything, or PayPal, whatever the heck I used. Postage, Over $80 postage. Now, this was not to have it sent by courier same day. This was the regular cheapest postage was $81 US for a flipping book.
And I thought you were exaggerating when you told me that.
And you went and
I went and checked myself, and the amount that you told me was exactly...
Was I exaggerating in the slice?
No, you were not.
Well, then I went online and did a bit of a Google search on this to see if anyone else was equally outraged. And I saw one man's comment on a blog posting somewhere, and he said, I went to buy a DVD, coincidentally from the same person, a single DVD. How much do you think that shipped for, Chris? He said, over $90 postage and handling for a DVD.
That's insanity.
It's worse than that. So I wrote to this hypnosis instructor and I said, $81 postage for a single book is obscene.
Yeah.
He never responded. Now, there's only two possibilities here. Either he owns the shipping company, in which case this is absolutely without excuse and is gouging people, or he doesn't own the shipping company and associates with a shipping company that is gouging people. In any case, you know who you are. I'm calling you to task. This is an obscenity.
We want to see this change.
I want to see this change. And we don't do this to you. If you buy one of our products, let's say it's not a download.
Actually, the only physical product we sell right now
our
is
power induction course. Now, when you
Inductions.
get this is a package, beautifully packaged DVD. I'm not trying to sell you this. I'm just showing you the difference. A DVD with all these power inductions and unshot professionally and an audio CD accompaniment. So you got 2 discs in the box that explains all the stuff that we're doing in the video. It costs $97. It's a premium price for a premium product.
But
we will ship it to you anywhere in the world for free. That's right. We don't charge you postage. We don't charge you another $90. Or if I was going to buy a book and spend, and with this I'll close, $81 on postage, Chris, I could have the crown jewels of England stolen and shipped to me same day for that.
Yes.
Isn't that a great line? I was trying to think of the perfect one on the way
That
here.
is a great line.
So
hyperbolic.
Hyperbole, yeah. So anyway, enough of that. But it drives me absolutely nuts because that's just ripping people off. What, you're not making enough money on your product or your trainings that you got to gouge people on postage? Enough said.
Yeah, if you sell stuff, shipping should be very reasonable, or in our case, it's baked into the price. And your guarantee policies really should be there to serve your customers.
So check the postage costs on anything before you click OK.
Exactly. All right, let's move on to... Oh, no, we didn't even talk about some of the content that's in the book. So we have to make one point that just... Point. This is the kind of stuff that bothers me. So, Mike, you sent me this...
There is good stuff in here. Again, we are not shredding the book. There's good stuff in here. There's good book in... Probably even in Mein Kampf, if you were to look through it far enough. That would be a tough one. Well, I'm saying, even if it's just something like, it's a beautiful sunny day as I'm writing this from prison. Whatever.
Yeah.
But
so let me.
I was trying to pick the worst possible example. I don't think I failed in that.
So you texted me and you said that you were buying this book. And I thought, I'm going to beat you to the punch. I found it on the Google Play Store in digital form. It wasn't the Amazon Kindle store. In this case, it was Google's. And so I bought it in the electronic format, and I started reading it on my phone. And actually, I even figured out a way to get it onto my iPad and all that.
Now, was there anything about scripts in that book, Chris?
Yeah, of course there was. It was all about having your script books ready. And in fact, it was suggesting
keep
that
your powder scripts out of sight, Chris. Keep them out of sight.
Yeah, keep them out of sight, but wrap them in plastic so that when you now turn the pages, the subject
won't hear you reading scripts.
Turning the pages.
They won't hear you reading scripts because you're inept and cannot intersect with a human being.
Yes, don't read scripts, period. But here's the thing that really bothered me. Because I can definitely understand that in some cases, a script is going to work. It's not the best way to do it, but it can still work, right?
Absolutely. A script, I've backed off on this point to a degree. The only place, I think, for scripts is as a training tool to learn to use language, but not something that you actually read.
So we would never deny that somebody reading a script could generate a sufficient trance and help that client make a change. That said, here's where it gets really horrible. This client is coming into your office and paying you really good money to do hypnosis with them. And the advice in this book includes having your tape recorder ready so that if you, the hypnotherapist,
have to go to the washroom
or leave the room to cough, you can just push play and leave the room.
Isn't that fantastic?
And I
There's a couple of things about going to the washroom in here, like in the first couple of chapters. Oh, yeah, until you're
it's almost like an obsession. Okay, so now we're officially going to stop talking about
we're going to
this.
stop talking about it. Okay, so this because my blood pressure's going through the roof on this. Okay,
please get good training, folks.
Get good training, guys.
All right, let's talk about NLP and
Chris,
timeline
you were going to mention
versus...
the All Access Pass.
Oh, yeah.
Really quick.
Okay,
We're not...
I don't want to turn this into a pitch fest, but a lot of people, I will say, for the Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy, over the last year and a half, not quite a year and a half because we launched June 18th, 2013. A lot of people wanted to know, can I get all of the content up front instead of being in a monthly drip feed program where we send you a new lesson every 2 weeks? Now, at the time we launched, we said no. And we actually started off saying, well, we'll never do that. Right. We couldn't do it because we hadn't finished creating all the content. We were about 8 lessons ahead of our first customers, and we were creating new lessons to stay ahead. Now, after almost 17 months, I guess it's been, we're done recording 32 lessons, and we've had enough requests, enough people who want to go through at a faster pace. I almost said I did say pace, a faster pace. That we have started selling what we call the All Access Pass. So instead of a monthly subscription,
you can do it all up front.
You just pay one fee and never pay another fee ever again. You get everything that we have. You get
including the ongoing webinars that we're continuing to produce. So.
And all the bonus content is unlocked immediately.
Check it out, MikeMandelHypnosis.com. And let's see where we're going to go with this, Chris. Where else did you want to go?
Okay, so we have a couple of notes here. We wanted to talk about idiomotor responses. We also wanted to talk about NLP and timelines versus abreaction.
Okay, well, let's see what we can fit in.
Where do you want to go?
Let's go to idiomotor responses right away, because I think this is an interesting thing. Idiomotor is idea produces motion. And it's a form of body language. In fact, you may not have considered this, but even graphology is a form of body language.
And I also want to throw in here that idiomotor means things like just muscles tensing up, right?
Sure.
So if you're watching a scary movie and you find that your muscles tense up and you notice that is idea idiomotor causing motion.
And the funniest one I used to see as a kid was my mom was a very nervous traveler, Enneagram type 6. But she had a 7 wing, so she was adventurous, wanted to get out there, but was nervous. She never had a driver's license in her life. And she would sit in the front seat with my dad, at the front of the car, could never relax in a car. And was always putting the brake on and bracing for impact.
My wife does it. We call it the fake brake pedal,
the
imaginary brake pedal.
And that's idiomotor as well. Idea is producing motion.
Right.
You see it all the time. People nodding their head for yes, shaking their head for no. Idiomotor.
Hey,
again.
I'm doing that right now.
So am I. So I've been experimenting with idiomotor stuff, Chris, for a really cool purpose. And this came out of the work of Dabney Ewan. And Dabney Ewan is a medical doctor, actually a really interesting hypnosis trainer. I've read a bunch of his stuff, and I like his by and large. And never giving anyone 100%.
We only name people when we like them.
Yeah, that's right. And his stuff is really good. And he talks extensively on hypnoanalysis using idiomotor signals. And he gave me an idea that I think is fantastic. And it came from him. I didn't come up with it. It was using idiomotor signals yourself in self-hypnosis. And the thing I like about his distinction is when those of you who don't know what we mean, we would have one finger lift for yes, and maybe the first finger of the left hand lift for no, as signals that you can get right from the unconscious mind. So idiomotor work does not have to be done in deep trance. It can be done in the hypnoidal state right on the surface.
Right. Just to clarify, the general rule of thumb that we teach is install yes to be the index finger of the right hand and no to be the index finger of the left hand.
Right.
For someone who has never used idiomotor signals before, that just works and it's easy for you to remember.
And then you never have to change your mind. Like, I don't agree with this letting the person choose. Oh, which one do you want to use for yes and which for no? Then you got to remember each time. Just do the same every time. But some people add all these confusing ones.
Yes and no, and maybe, and I don't want to tell you.
Right, and answer next year, and all of this stuff.
Keep it digital.
Yeah, keep it simple. Yes and no. And I think the thing that Dabney Ewan adds as well is he said not I don't know, because he said people will default to that if they don't want to answer, but yes, no, and I don't want to answer yet.
Okay.
So he's giving them an option. I'll bend on that one. But what he said that's really cool is I always framed it as yes and no. And because I'm always learning, I'm adopting now what he said, which is not just yes or no, but he's turning it into a kinesthetic response Does it feel like yes, or does it feel like no? So
That's
you're
brilliant.
getting an unconscious signal, which now gives you the
It's
ability to answer sort of consciously with the signal based on the feeling you're getting with it.
And it's permission to be wrong, too, because
Permission
you're not,
to be wrong.
You're not asking for certainty here.
Absolutely, because when we are dealing with clients' problems, and we often are, it isn't what's true or false, folks. It's their perception of it, which is why I don't believe in past lives. But if my client believes in past lives or believes that, he was on Jupiter, and I worked with a client once, Chris, and you'll love this one. Not only did she believe in past lives, and I'm hiding the person's identity by saying she when it was actually a guy. Not only did she believe in past lives, she believed in future lives that had already lived. So in a future life, she was on, Rigel 4 or Alpha Centauri or something like that, and had already lived a future life. So this is now time is becoming not just turns and eddies, but extremely flexible at this point.
Are you using confusion induction on me right
now?
No,
I'm not.
A future life
in my marriage?
A future life that she's already lived.
Yes. So what do I do in a case like that, Chris? Do I say, no, I don't believe in this, you're crazy, this isn't true?
No, you have to build rapport.
Honor
maintain
her
rapport,
model of the world.
Honor.
Act as though it's true. It's true for her. And that's where the changes will come in. If I believe that I was hanged in a previous life and that's why I choke sometimes, then that has to be cleared up as though it is true, because it's the perception is everything with hypnosis. So I liked his work. I think he's done some really cool work with setting up the feelings, but you can use this with self-hypnosis.
Okay, yeah, let's get back to that, because that's
Put
why you
yourself
brought
in
it
a
up.
hypnotic trance, Chris, and you can use it for hypnoanalysis of a dream you just had.
Oh, no kidding.
And so, yeah, it works well. So you know how Human Gibbons theory basically says that your dreams are an outworking of all the emotional arousal from the previous day that is not discharged. The dreams permit you to discharge it so you don't get this huge backlog of debt that is not processed emotionally. And the dreams let you metaphorically process the unprocessed emotion from the previous day. So this enables you. Then you have this weird dream. And I had one last night. I won't bore anyone with it because dreams are only interesting to ourselves. But I set up idiomotor signals. Unconscious, are you willing to let me know what this is? I got a yes signal. And okay, please do it now. And bang, the meaning of the dream rushed into my conscious awareness instantly, and how it tied into this funeral we have to go to tomorrow.
Oh.
And it's amazing. So I urge my listeners, our listeners, Chris, who are skilled at self-hypnosis, to begin to use idiomotor signals and notice the spectacular result you get in self-analysis, especially of dreams.
And for those of you wondering, how do I do self-hypnosis? Remember, there were podcasts on this exact subject. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but somewhere less than 51, there is a podcast number that discusses self-hypnosis. And I know for sure we talked about it on the stress relief podcast.
We did. Okay, so let's wrap this up because we're coming into 32 minutes. Let's go down our list here and see where we're
even
going.
more coming. So, you talked about hypnotic intersections, so we're good on that.
Let me just tell you one more thing. It's one more final point because it also ties in the trip to Boston. Those of you who have been listening regularly, and Chris and I get emails from all over the world from our amazing hypnotic storm riders who've joined us now and cutting through the garbage and the nonsense and learning to be the best they can be. And one of the things that's a huge hit is Robert Anton Wilson's quarter game.
Oh, yeah.
Where you vividly visualize and imagine you're going to find a quarter in a startling place that will seem that it was placed there for you. It'll be so obvious. And then wait to see how long it takes. Well, I hadn't done it in a while, and I know Lisa and Andrea got right into this, and Suzanne. It's three of our hypno babes. So what happened was a couple of days before I went to Boston, I did the focus again that I was going to find a quarter placed in a very deliberate place. And so I'm at the airport store, Pearson Airport, YYZ if you're American, and I bought a bag of beef jerky and a bag of salted roasted almonds because I wanted to have some Primal Blueprint
foods,
snacks with me that are protein and fat and good stuff. I bought these bags of stuff, paid for with my Visa to get the extra points, and as she gave me my receipt, in front of me, between me and the desk in the airport, was a rack of candy bars, and sit directly in front of me, a quarter was on edge between the candy bars. And I just went, oh, no,
That's
here
so
we go
funny.
again.
Did you leave it there for someone else?
I gave it to the woman.
Yeah.
Not off to the side, directly as though it was placed right where I was standing.
Insane.
So do the quarter experiment.
That is so funny. All right, Mike, so let's wrap up with a metaphor. What do you have for us?
Today, Chris, I want to talk about Dr. Roach and the power of rain. Those of you who've listened for any time are well aware that I am obsessed with rain, or at least enjoy it greatly. And I have numerous versions of rain in my iPod, including one I really enjoy, which is a sound that is anchored to my childhood, and many of you will know this. It's the sound of rain from inside a car, and it creates this cozy environment. You hear rain washing on the windshield, and you hear the windshield wipers pulsing. And as a kid, going camping or something with my parents, and the rain falling and the windshield wipers going caused this really relaxing state. But I've been obsessed with rain as long as I can remember. And I had one of the most terrifying dentists in the universe, Dr. Howard Roach in Toronto, who was very tall, very thin, and extremely elderly. And he walked with a cane. I don't know if he had polio once, whatever it was. He would whistle when he'd come in the room, which was terrifying because it was always the warning. And I'd hear him just sit there terrified, because Howard Roach did not give us local anesthetic. He would just go drilling for oil in secondary molars and he used to squeeze the nurse's hands, one on each side, and I'd be catatonic, rigid feet sticking out in front of me, and he'd be just drilling away. And it was a freaking nightmare. But the thing is, rain was so relaxing for me, even though my father and I had the first dental appointment of the day at 7:30 in the morning at Greenwood Avenue and Danforth Avenue in Toronto. I'd be terrified the night before, but if I woke up, having British teeth, of course, which meant lots of dental work, if I woke up and it was raining, I can so clearly remember its pacifying effect on me that all the way to Dr. Roach's office, the rain in the car, I had no nervousness at all. And to this day, I can stand in a doorway in the rain and trance out in seconds and move maybe just 4 inches for the next 2 hours as the rain continues to fall without the slightest bit of notice of the time passing.
This has been podcast number 53 of Brain Software with Mike Mandel, and I'm Chris Thompson. Hope you enjoyed it. As always, feel free to send us your emails, info@mikemandelhypnosis.com. We love getting your emails, your suggestions, your questions, ideas for podcasts, and make sure that you check out the Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy if you have an interest in personally learning hypnosis from what I believe is the best hypnosis training material available online, because our live classes are always sold out months in advance. MikeMandelHypnosis.com/academy. And finally, head on over to iTunes and leave a rating for this podcast. We would love for you to share your opinion of this podcast with the planet. Thanks.
Good night. Mr. Thompson, I ever tell you the story of Squatter's funeral?
No, you haven't.
A very, very interesting thing. Shortly after Dennis Bryce Morgan cut his head off with a guillotine in the role of Chung-Ling Soo, the Chinese magician. A very funny thing, as you recall. Anyway, we had a funeral booked, and Bryce Morgan ran it, being such a good chap. And the people began to arrive the day before from all over the UK, the men from the regiment as well. Well, this one chap came in, a younger chap. He looked so much like Squatter, we couldn't believe it. Bryce Morgan went white. He thought he was apoplectic. And he said, who are you? He said, I'm Henry Squatter's younger brother, Harry Squatter. So Morgan's eyes lit up at this, immediately. He said, I'm here for my brother's funeral. He said, oh, that's wonderful. He said, let me take you aside here. We want to make sure it's run properly. And he said, do you realize the patron of our regiment is Edward the Confessor? And he said, no, and I barely know who that is. He was a man from history. In fact, Edward the Confessor had an elite group of bodyguards, 100 of them. And out of the 100 who would protect him, he had just a dozen who were so tough that they would not even wear trousers. They'd wear a tunic, and around their nether regions, they'd wear a leather bag with 2 holes cut in it and their legs protruding. And at the front, they'd have a slit cut and permit all of their genitalia, is that the word? It was something like that. Anyway, their wedding tackle would be hanging out the front, and this was a symbol of how tough they were because they weren't afraid of being stabbed in the groin. Just everything in full view. And Squatter was very surprised to hear this. And he said, well, why are you telling me this, Lieutenant Bryce Morgan? He said, because we are closely aligned with the bagmen of Edward the Confessor, which is what they were called, and we're all showing up in the bagmen uniform tomorrow as solidarity with Edward the Confessor and with your brother. I advise you to do the same. He said, oh, I'll get on it right away, which, of course, was the entire point. Well, everyone showed up for the funeral, and it was so funny. Bryce Morgan had set him up. He'd done a proper Irish funeral, so he was propped up in a casket. Normally, you put a bottle of Irish whiskey in one hand and a glass of whiskey in the other, but he had his head stitched on backwards to make it funnier. And in one hand, instead of the bottle of whiskey, he had a jar of formalin solution with his kidney in it that he'd cut out before. And in his right hand was a smaller jar with the glands he'd severed trying to open the oyster from a previous episode. Funniest damn thing. Lady Melbury, lovely, low-cut dress, very décolletage, leaned over the casket to say, oh, so sorry, and the gland swelled up as she drew near. And the funniest damn thing, he had a post-mortem erection. So, about this time, we're all laughing and the head backwards and everything, and the door opened, and Harry Squall came in. He's wearing the regimental jacket, and he was wearing the uniform of the bagman of Edward the Confessor. He had a cloth bag round his waist, the leather implants, and he cut the front out, and his wedding tackle was there in full view. And there was a gasp, and everyone was horrified, and the military police dragged him off to the stockade. He was fined £400 for public indecency. Funniest damn thing.
That's the most absurd story ever.